This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes and Twitter.
and I'm Sam Abul Samad from Navigant Research and Autonomous Vehicle Engineering and the Tech Guy Radio Show and all kinds of other places where you can just Google my name and find me.
I think we need a podcast just so you can tell us all of the outlets that you contribute to.
And I'm Rebecca Lindland from RebeccaDrives.com and a little bit of Forbes and TV, print, and radio.
Yeah.
Outstanding.
There you go.
Look at that. Diverse way to get your fix of our opinions, should you want them.
Yeah.
And you do, because you're here. So let's give you some opinions. We'll talk about cars again this week before we do anything else. But we have the New York show coming up, and there's a very, very exciting day, a new holiday for July 18th.
Yes.
We'll do our normal Tesla talk a little bit, and then talk about the New York Times talking about the Boeing 737 and whatever else strikes our fancy. But you know what? Let's just go down the list. Sam, you've got the 2019 Nissan Murano Platinum, which sounds really nice and looks good. Is it as good as it looks?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've liked the Murano, especially in its current generation form, since it came out a few years ago, and it got a very mild refresh for the 2019 model year. Excuse me. And I think the interestingly, everybody thinks of the Murano as a crossover, but it's actually kind of a weird little quirk of the way the EPA regulations work. For classifying vehicles for fuel economy, for corporate average fuel economy, when manufacturers submit a vehicle to EPA for certification, they have to pick out a segment for that vehicle. For sedans, it's pretty straightforward. And you got small, medium, large cars. For pickup trucks, obviously light trucks, vans, light trucks. But when you get into SUVs and crossovers, things can get a little weird. And so the way that they define, because they actually calculate the corporate fuel economy for trucks, for light trucks, and for cars separately. There's counted as two separate fleets. And so for SUVs, they have two classes of SUVs. They have small SUVs and standard SUVs. Standard SUVs are counted towards the truck fleet. Small SUVs are counted towards the car fleet if they're two-wheel drive.
Wait,
Small
what?
SUVs that are four-wheel drive are counted as light trucks. But because there's no hard and fast rule necessarily what fleet or which category most vehicles are actually supposed to go into, manufacturers actually have some flexibility. So at Nissan, the Pathfinder is actually classified as a small SUV, and a small SUV is one that has a gross vehicle weight rating of less than 6,000 pounds.
Okay.
If it's over 6,000 pounds, then it's a standard SUV and it's a truck. But for the Pathfinder, they made it 5,985 pounds, so they artificially limited the payload capacity.
Oh, it's
a small SUV.
Is that
clearly a large?
Is that the gross vehicle weight, or is that the?
Yeah,
okay.
that's the gross
I was
vehicle
gonna say,
weight.
it's
So that's
not
the weight
that
of the
heavy.
vehicle. That's the gross vehicle. That's the weight of the vehicle plus its payload.
Plus its payload, right?
Its maximum payload. So it's 5,985.
People and cargo and stuff.
Yes, everything you can put it. That's the most you're supposed to put into it. The Murano, on the other hand, as much as we like to complain about why are people driving SUVs instead of station wagons, looks like an SUV, looks like a crossover, but it's actually classified as a station wagon.
What?
Only in two-wheel drive?
No, in any
forms.
form, it's classified as a station wagon. It's not even classified for EPA certification purposes as an SUV. So the four-wheel drive ones count towards the car fleet as well as the two-wheel drive
Why?
ones.
I don't get that. I mean, how did they get away with that?
Well, I mean, the rules, as far as, what counts towards what are generally kind of vague. Right. So, the manufacturers have some discretion as to which category they want to put a particular vehicle in. And then, in the case, in cases like this one, and there's other examples that we can find, from other manufacturers. But, generally what they're trying to do is, they're looking at, okay, how many of each model line do we think we're going to sell? They know what their targets are that they have to hit for corporate average fuel economy for for cars and light trucks. And so basically they're trying to balance, if they think they're doing, that they're going to be well ahead on the car side and maybe lagging behind a little bit on the truck side, then, they may take something like the Pathfinder, which is clearly a large vehicle, and classify it as a small SUV, and by limiting the gross weight rating, and so then half of the Pathfinder fleet ends up counting towards the cars because they've got a lot of fuel efficient cars that bring up their average, so that then when they add in the front wheel drive Pathfinders, they fit in fine there. And the same thing goes with the Murano. So it's just a matter of kind of budgeting. So manufacturers do this all the time, but budgeting, doing their fuel economy budgets. So it's kind of a weird little quirk of the system.
I could see the argument for the Murano being a station wagon, and I think you could actually extend
it is
that,
basically just a high riding mid-sized station wagon.
Right, you could actually extend that to the Pathfinder if you really wanted to. I've driven no other vehicle that reminds me more of the late 70s B-body GM wagons, just the way it behaves on the road, than a Pathfinder.
That's actually a very good point.
Okay.
So as much as we complain about, why are people buying crossovers instead of station wagons? The reality is they actually are buying station wagons. They sit a little bit higher than traditional station wagons.
So what did you think of the Murano?
Oh yeah, that. I actually really like the looks of the Murano. I think it's actually the best execution of kind of that current generation of the Nissan design language, that V-Motion design language or whatever it is they call it. And I think I think it's a really nice design. Everything is kind of really well balanced. It's got some nice swoops and everything, and it just, I think it looks good, and it actually drives quite well too. I mean, it's based on the similar architecture to the Maxima and Altima, and it's got good ride quality. With the VQ V6 in there, with a little shy of 300 horsepower, it's got plenty of power. I think the Nissan Xtronic CVT is still remains probably the best execution of a CVT among any manufacturer. It doesn't really have that CVT kind of motorboating feel to it. It feels more like a traditional transmission.
Right.
It's a nice vehicle to drive. The kind of the only real complaint I had, and this one was the Platinum edition. So it was pretty much fully loaded with every option, nice leather interior and wood trim and everything. The infotainment system in the Nissans, in the current generation Nissans, the interface is fine. It's a little bit old feeling. It's not the prettiest interface, but it works fine. But it is very slow to boot up, and especially when you plug in a phone and you want to use Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, it does take a long time to launch that. So I get in the car, plug in the phone, and it's not until I'm backed out of the driveway and starting to drive down the street that the Android Auto screen actually comes up. It takes that long. But aside from that, everything else is nice. I have no real complaints.
So it's interesting because I happen to have the Murano this week as well, and it's a Platinum and the whole thing. And I actually drove my sister and her family to the airport this morning, and there was 4 of us, and they had 4 bags. One was a large checked bag size, and then 3 good size carry-ons. And first of all, they fit perfectly all in the back, straight up on its side. And everyone was commenting, because my sister used to have a Murano years ago, on just how comfortable it was. And I didn't find that with the HMI. It actually, it came on very, very quickly and worked great. We had Waze on through Android Auto, and it worked terrific. The issue that I have that is really surprising to me, and I actually took pictures to reach out to our PR friends at Nissan, is the quality of the fit is dreadful. The passenger side front door is completely crooked. So above the front, when you look at the dashboard, above the vents on the right side, in the passenger side, there is a gap that your finger can fit into. And on the driver's side, there's almost
From
none.
the exterior or interior?
Both. So I first noticed it on the exterior, that the trim where the door meets the A pillar and runs through the A pillar, it was crooked. I was like, this is, and when the guy dropped it off, I said, this looks really weird. And then when I got in the vehicle, the entire door is off. It doesn't, we don't necessarily find it, in terms of the vehicle's still quiet. It still drives really nicely, but
The door sounds like the door is just significantly misaligned.
It is significantly misaligned, and I'm absolutely shocked that it would leave the factory like this.
Well, maybe it didn't. Maybe you got one of those journalist specials that somebody crashed into something and they fixed
Well, it has 1,100 miles on it, and like I said, when the FMI guy dropped it off, we were walking around kind of talking about Nissan, and I looked and I went, what is, like, it was so noticeable that, and he didn't indicate the vehicle had had any issues. And like I said, it has 1,100 miles on it. So it's fairly new to the fleet. I'm really, really surprised by that, because otherwise I really liked it. Yeah.
Does the body line up? Because this is pretty significant bone line that runs down basically from above the rear lights down to under the mirror is sort of its lowest point, and then it kicks up and goes into the front fender. So it goes across 4 panels. And if the door is misaligned, that's going to be misaligned. Or is it just like there's just a giant honking gap there?
You know what? I'll look at it more closely. I don't have the. I'm driving something else as well, so I don't have it right here. But I'll look at it more closely. It just. It was really. I mean, it was so noticeable. And so then this morning, I showed my sister and my 10-year-old niece from the back. She was like, "Wow, look at that!" Like, it's. I mean, it's pronounced.
Yeah. Yeah, and some of it may be on the interior, the way the dash and the door panel comes together. There's definitely going to be a gap there, but yeah,
it's so far off from the driver's side. That's the thing that I noticed, was that, it's fine. You're supposed to have that little where the door and the dash meet, but the driver's side is very, very tight, and the passenger side, as I said, I can literally put my index finger into that hole.
Yeah, I'm looking at the photos of the one that I had, and I did not have any. I mean, everything was perfectly fit and aligned on the one that I had. So, yeah, it sounds like you definitely got a lemon there. There's something definitely wrong with that. And I am kind of, especially for a press fleet vehicle. I mean, they usually go over those with a fine tooth comb. When it comes back, if it's got. If you happen to scrub a curb a little bit and, scrape a wheel, they will let you know.
Right.
And, so it seems unusual for something that obvious to get through.
Yeah. It's, as I said, I'm very, very surprised that it left the factory like this. I'll send you some pictures so you can post them.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe we can drop a picture or two in the post.
Yes.
So, listeners can see what we're talking about.
And it's a shame, as I said, because I think the vehicle I really like it. There's things that are really good about it.
Yeah. And like you said, the cargo area is quite spacious, because it's only a 2-row. They didn't try to squeeze in a 3rd row, because they have the Pathfinder if you need a 3-row vehicle.
Right.
And so you've got lots of room for 4 bags in there and assorted other accoutrements for traveling. And the back seat is quite roomy as well.
Yeah.
So. Do you feel like it's, go ahead. Did you feel like it's an issue with the Murano just because it's been around for so long that sometimes you need to be reminded that it's here? Because every time I drive one, I like it. I find them, like you said, they're comfortable, they're quiet, they're, powerful enough. And in the trim that they send out for journalists, it's always like the platinum trim or whatever. So they're very nice. They're almost in that like semi-luxury space when they're dressed up like this. But it's a vehicle that I sometimes forget is there.
Well, I mean, it's in a segment where there's so much competition as well that it would be easy to forget that it exists. But when you see one though, because its design does quite stand out from the crowd in that segment, in that mid-size 2-row crossover segment. You compare it to something like a Ford Edge or or whatever else is out there, and it does stand out quite a bit. So I'm surprised that it actually doesn't sell better than a lot of its competition.
I don't know how much. I mean, I don't know the last time I saw an ad for the Murano, so I don't know how much marketing dollars they're putting behind it. But yeah, I agree. I think I think it's a really, really nice vehicle. I mean, it's perfect for a small family, or empty nesters. I mean, I think it's, again, like judging from our experience this morning, packing it for somebody going away on a trip, it was tight for sure. You can't put any gear. And so, I think that we talked about it, like the fact that the Pathfinder would be better suited for somebody with one or more kids. But I think otherwise, as you say, though, Sam, it's an incredibly competitive segment.
So yours is the Platinum. Does it have the quilted leather and the
got all,
what's the fancy color?
Let me see what they call it. It is it's the mocha almond pearl.
Oh, that's like
it's a brown.
Yeah.
But it's a really attractive color.
Yeah, mine's a beautiful blue. I don't have the sticker here, but
the deep blue pearl.
Yeah. That's gorgeous.
Yeah, so that's like these are the things, and it's probably why they're sending you the Platinums in the fleet is for 2019. Although it's a model that's been around for a while, they've got some updates for it. So they changed the grille a little bit. They popped in some LED headlights. So I'm interested to know how those perform because the whole industry is going toward LED headlights, at least as a premium feature, and some are better than others. Although given the technology, they should all be really good. There seems to have been some backsliding on headlight quality back to the days where you'd have, patchy patterns and just crappy illumination.
Yeah.
And so even though we have these LEDs that are very efficient and bright, they don't always put the light where you need it on the road, and it's impossible to upgrade like it was, like you could do in the old days. So, they went with LED lights and then the new colors and the luxuriousness in the interior, which seems to be the pattern when you've got a model that's been around for a while. You add luxury and features and packages.
And increasingly customers are opting for those more premium trim packages anyway.
Well, it's nice.
Yeah, I mean it's a nice place to spend time. When you got to drive somewhere, and for the automakers, it's huge margins on that. The incremental, the extra price that they charge to go from an SV to a Platinum is significantly more than what the added cost of adding that hardware.
Yeah. And for families too, I guess this year they added the rear door alert, which is, are you getting that? Like every time you shut it off, does it tell you to check the rear doors or something like that?
No, the way it works is it actually pays attention to which door is open before you start the car, or before you move. So if it saw that the rear door opened and then closed, and then you go somewhere, then it'll give you the alert that hey, check the back seat, make sure you haven't left something behind if the door hasn't opened again. If you don't open the rear door, if you just get in and drive, and then it won't give you any kind of alert. In my case, I used it to go to a couple of meetings, and I threw my computer bag in the back seat, and so I had to reach in there to grab it anyway when I got out. So it didn't do any of that. It didn't give me any alerts because I had opened the door and retrieved something from the back.
Yeah, similarly, it's smart. So if you don't open the back door, you won't get the reminder. And I actually, I found the headlights, to be quite good. I drove last night in the dark. I drove this morning. The automatic headlights were very good. The high beams and low beams responded appropriately. Again, I think overall, I liked it. I think it's a good solid vehicle as long as your door's aligned.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
you know, for $46,000, that door should be aligned.
I think
Right.
the interior is
Although,
gorgeous.
you know, who knows? Maybe they're trying to emulate Tesla.
Not that have to charge twice as much, and all the panels be misaligned and mismatched. All right, that's enough. That's not. But it was 46K, and what are you getting for fuel economy? I'm assuming it's like low 20s.
Yeah, it was about 24, 25.
Yeah, I actually got closer to 28 this morning with no traffic and, you know, going straight all highway.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I did more city driving with mine, so it was a little bit lower.
Yeah, no, I was pleased.
So
Go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say something ridiculous. So go ahead.
No, I was very pleased with that was the rest of the trips have been in town, and I was getting similar, Sam. But the highway one was really good, and they gave me a little reward as saying, you know, something about best fuel economy that I had driven. So that was nice.
Yeah, when you stop the car and shut it off, it all, you know, flashes up on the screen, you know, what your average for the current trip was and what your best overall has been. So, you know, just as a reminder, it's like, hey, you were a little hard on the gas pedal this trip. You know, you might want to back off a little.
I hope you can shut that off. All right, well, let's move on to what you're driving. Yeah. Right. Exactly. You're not going to have a choice after a while. They're going to program it in with the GPS, and you're going to be stuck. So Rebecca, you've had a couple of things. You had a Blazer, you had an Outlander PHEV, and you're at least coming up on the Eclipse Cross. I don't know if you've got it.
I have the Eclipse Cross. So, let's see. Do we want to? So I've got the Eclipse Cross, and I drove the Mitsubishi Outlander as well. So I had two Mitsubishis back to back because I was supposed to be meeting with some of their executives. So I said, you know, I haven't driven these vehicles in a while. And so if we're talking about, let's start with the PHEV, the Outlander PHEV. This is the 2019. Honestly, I didn't drive it very much through a variety of circumstances, which was unfortunate because I wanted to try and get a better feel for the vehicle. But this one has, you're able to basically charge it. It gets 74 miles per gallon E and then 25 miles per gallon in general. So I think I want to say it had maybe 40 miles of range at most. And it's kind of like a smart range. So you can adjust it, right, depending upon what you're doing. And so sometimes, if you, like when I was testing it, I put it in all PHEV mode to see how that was, and then in gas mode. But I think the biggest issue that I had was that it was the tire noise and the overall noise of the vehicle was so loud that I thought there was something wrong with it. Like I picked up my brother and I said, please drive on these roads with me and tell me, am I going crazy? Around the twists and the turns, it made this groaning noise that was just overwhelming. I mean, it was weird. And it almost felt like something was rubbing against something else in the vehicle. And I don't know, have you guys driven?
I have, actually.
We both
have.
I don't know about the rubbing noise, other than maybe that's the electric drivetrain doing regen or something as you turn. I don't know.
Well, it was definitely.
No, that sounds like there's something mechanically wrong, because it shouldn't be doing that. You know, I mean, regen is generally not going to make any noise.
Well, it was on, when I noticed it the most was on the twisties. So there's a couple of roads in town that are ideal for that kind of back and forth, and the vehicle itself handled okay. We finally kind of pinpointed
for a Mitsubishi.
No, come on.
It wasn't, I didn't have a lot of tall, in an SUV, I didn't feel like it was going to tip over or something.
No, it's got a heavy battery down in there.
But it was the tire noise was really, really loud on it. And that's kind of what we sort of ended up narrowing it down to. It was just, it was kind of just it was a compromised ride for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that may be the tires overall as you make them corner. If they're low rolling resistance, they'll still sound like a bearing sometimes. Gets shot. It's just like
the other thing is, it may be that some sort of shielding or noise shield or something has come loose on that one, and that may be when you're cornering, it may be rubbing against something. And that might also be contributing to more noise because I don't remember it being particularly noisy when I drove it.
I no noisier than the regular Outlander.
Well, that's interesting. Well, for almost $43,000, I mean, you've got to have a serious dedication to the environment to want this vehicle.
Well, so yeah, this is where I was really curious about the Outlander PHEV because it's not a new car at all.
Right.
It's old stuff, but it's been updated as much as they can. Mitsubishi's in this struggle, I think. The PHEV can do a couple of different things that I think are pretty unique in its class. You can fast charge it if you can find a fast charger that will do it.
Actually, there's quite a few now. There's over 1,000 CHAdeMO stations around the country.
Okay. Good. I mean, I didn't have enough time.
Mitsubishi is the only other one besides Nissan that's using CHAdeMO in the U.S. market.
So is that good or bad, though? Does that make it harder to find a station for you to charge it? Like, you couldn't go down to your supercharger station and get...
No, but you can't charge anything else other than a Tesla at a supercharger station. Yeah. But most DC fast charging stations, whether they're EVgo, ChargePoint, Electrify America, they all have both CHAdeMO and CCS charging cables, charging connectors on there. So last time I was in California with the Nero EV, I stopped at a couple of different EVgo stations, and each of the chargers had both cables on there, so you could pick one or the other, whatever, depending on what car you had.
Yeah, and the other thing I liked about it was that it's not that huge, and it does offer you that switchable. You can decide when you want to use the battery and when you want to just run as a hybrid, which I liked that. And at low 40s. Before you try to take advantage of any tax incentives, depending on where you are.
Yeah, I mean, you still get a $7,500 tax credit on that thing.
So it's an Outlander, so it's definitely like driving something from the 90s. But on the other hand, it does have a little bit of unique niche carved out for itself, which I thought that was interesting because it's easy to be cynical about Mitsubishi right now. And the Outlander's, I think it's a unique enough hybrid. And when I had it, I thought it was nice that you don't miss any of the functionality of it's a 3-row, but it's a tiny 3-row. But you don't, the battery doesn't intrude. The way they've packaged it works pretty well. It's old, it's been around a while. You can abuse it, and it's not really going to complain. You can drive it like you stole it, is what I mean. Because I did, and
following
it was fine.
The speed limit, of course.
Yes, following the speed limit in my head, and that little bit of extra weight that the battery gives makes it feel a little solid. Because that stuff is Mitsubishi has done the best with what they've got. They're the best that they can with what they've got, which I applaud. So there's a little bit of underdog spirit to it. But if you want a 3-row plug-in hybrid in that size factor, like, what are your options other than the Outlander PHEV?
Highlander?
At the moment, unless you go into the premium stuff like the BMW X5,
is the Highlander
that plug-in hybrid?
Isn't there
there's no plug-in version of the
okay,
Highlander. But in the next few months, you will have the option of like the Lincoln Aviator. The Explorer is only going to be available as a regular hybrid, not as a plug-in. But yeah, it's still fairly limited right now.
But I'm not sure what you gain. Like, that's the thing, is that unless it's a HOV lane sticker in California or something.
You do get that.
That's a significant get.
Yeah, so that makes
sure.
that makes a big difference. And if you if you live in California, in addition to the $7,500 federal tax credit, there's also a $2,500 state tax credit. There's state credits, or incentives in other states as well. So that can get you down to about $30,000. And depending on if you have a relatively short commute, you may be able to do most of your driving on electricity alone. So, it can make a difference.
I do I'm so sad that Chevy is discontinuing the Volt, because I do like having the option. I mean, I think that that's really well suited, having, both electric and gas. I just think that's really well suited for a lot of people's lives. And, maybe it's not necessary anymore, but, I think it's a good option. And to that end, go ahead.
Oh, I just remembered the other one that you should really be considering before you think about the Outlander plug-in hybrid is the Chrysler Pacifica hybrid, which is a much nicer vehicle.
Yeah,
costs about the same, has about 33 miles of electric range, and it's actually much roomier and much more practical than the Outlander.
Is not an SUV though. It does not have all-wheel drive.
That's true.
So the SUV thing is like if you're buying a 3-row SUV or crossover, you're kind of looking for practicality. So the Pacifica is definitely a better choice. But
yeah.
But people, human beings don't make practical, logical choices when they're buying vehicles most of the time.
I do think though, if you're swayed by the Outlander, you are looking at it. You're comparing cars on a spreadsheet versus your head and your heart. Like kind of. Because I think if you are comparing it to something like the Highlander or the Pacifica or whatever, if you're cross shopping, there's places where as good as Mitsubishi has made the Outlander with what they've got, it still falls short. The infotainment's not good. It's better than it's been, but it's still it's limited in what that architecture can do. Just overall, it's amortized hardware, shall we say?
Yeah.
The whole car.
So honestly, I also have the Eclipse Cross SE trim with the 1.5 direct injection turbo engine, and that's it's a 5-seater and it's not a PHEV. It does drive
nominally a 5-seater.
Well, yes, it more like a 4.
It has 5 seatbelts.
Exactly. But that one is more fun to drive. I mean, I'm not crazy about the interior. I do. And it was interesting because I was reading other people's take on it, and maybe I'm just an interior snob, but there's a lot of hard plastic in that interior. But
no, I agree with you there.
But it is, it's 28,000 delivered. There's a lot of fun features in it. And I actually haven't had any issues with the infotainment system. So Android Auto worked great this morning, and
I think the Eclipse Cross has a newer, better infotainment system than the Outlander PHEV.
Okay, fair enough.
But yeah,
and the beauty of using a smartphone projection system like CarPlay or Android Auto is that even if the vehicle does come with a mediocre factory infotainment system, you plug in your phone and then it becomes largely irrelevant anyway.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder when the automakers are going to just give up and be like, you know what? The standard infotainment is
not anytime soon.
Yeah.
Well, and when you think Toyota doesn't even have Android, they don't have Apple CarPlay yet, right?
They do have CarPlay on a bunch of models now, and they just started rolling out Android Auto. I think starting with the Avalon.
Okay, because that's just shocking to me. It's 48, like the market's like 48-52 split. It's just amazing to me that they don't have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay just as part of the standard development package. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, we've in the past before you joined us, Dan and I had the discussion about BMW and their policies. They actually used to charge $200 extra to get CarPlay. They don't support Android Auto at all. They used to charge $200 extra for CarPlay, and they changed last year to going from a one-time flat rate fee to charging $80 a year subscription to get CarPlay.
Oh my gosh! Well, and this is why when they talk about BMW gesture things, I make inappropriate gestures.
But their customers will pay it. I mean, BMW doesn't mess around when it comes to figuring out how to be profitable.
True.
Yeah.
All right. So, the Outlander, I'm sorry, the Eclipse Cross is one that I was really excited for because it's supposedly all new, but it feels kind of old to me. Again, it feels more like an update than it was sort of touted as. So I don't know if I'm wrong on that or if it's just
No, I mean,
my opinion.
So RebeccaDrives.com is basically the theme is putting the right car in the right hands for 200 words or less. And the start of my review was Mitsubishi is the company that could almost. They want to. And I think that there's good people there. Fred Diaz is the North American CEO. He came from Nissan, actually, and he was also at Fiat Chrysler. I think that there's good people there. I think that they want to succeed, but I think that they are limited. Brand recognition and consideration, I think, is pretty low for the brand.
Well, I think,
I do like the fact that they capitalized on the use of Eclipse Cross.
Part of the.
I think that's a good thing, but they're definitely a challenged brand, and I think if you buy new, their resale value I think is really, really tough. You've got to have a specific reason for going after this brand and for buying it.
Yeah. Well, I think, and that's one of the things that we've talked about a little bit before too, is given the options on the market, it's really about what kind of individual deal you're going to get. What, is the Mitsubishi dealer close to you? Are they giving you attractive finance terms? Does it suit your needs? And do you want a new car versus used car? And there are reasons for going with all of those and ticking all those boxes. And the Mitsubishi is probably not going to be a problem as a new car owner for however long the warranty period is. The issue you're going to have is resale, and not every buyer really cares about resale so much. So I get that.
Right.
They're just, you're right. They're in a tough spot.
Yeah. I mean, I want them to succeed. I don't want anybody ever to fail, and nobody wins in that case. It's tough because I go in and say, okay, I want to like this. But there's definitely some compromises that you're going to make.
Yeah, and I think it's really the next generation of Mitsubishis where things may start to get interesting, as they start to transition over to platforms that they share with with Renault and Nissan, as now that they're part of the alliance.
Are they going to continue to be part of the alliance, or have the wheels come off of that?
No, not at all.
Well, for now they are.
I don't think the wheels have come off that alliance at all. I think internally there's still a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's hundreds and hundreds of people working on development based on the alliance. It wasn't just Carlos Ghosn.
Yeah. Right. And there's going to be a lot, there's going to be some realignment of the structure. But, I think that there's too much value to those three companies, especially to Renault and Nissan, in sharing the hardware that they do and sharing the technology that they do, for them to walk away entirely from the alliance. Because, the reality is, in the coming decade, there's going to be more consolidation of the industry, not less.
Yeah, well, and they have enough to cover it. I think it's going to be good for Mitsubishi if they can get some Renault platforms or some Nissan platforms. But I still want them to do Spec Mirage race series because that would be hilarious. And I would love to drive it.
That's awesome.
Well, that would definitely be the classic case of driving a slow car fast.
It would be amazing. Amazing. And you couldn't even get hurt. Like, they don't go fast enough.
But before we leave Mitsubishi entirely, I just wanted to let you know, I just looked on the AFDC website. It's the Alternative Fuels Data Center from the Department of Energy, and you can look up on there, for where to find stations for different fuels, whether it's electricity or biofuels or anything else. And you can filter by different types. So looking at CHAdeMO stations, there's currently 2,351 CHAdeMO stations across North America with 3,200 charging outlets. So they're usually smaller than supercharger stations, just one or two outlets each. So there's plenty of locations, and they're increasingly growing in the middle part of the country. They used to be concentrated on the coasts. By comparison, for superchargers, there's 644 locations. So there's about a quarter as many locations as there are for CHAdeMO. But since they typically have 6 to 12 outlets each, they have almost 6,000 charging outlets. But they're fewer and far between than the CHAdeMO.
Yeah. So charging is going to continue to be one of those things that you do at home mostly with these kind of vehicles.
Yeah. As long as you live somewhere where you can do that, if you don't live in an apartment or something like that.
Yeah. All right. Did we want to talk about the Blazer briefly, or should I just jump into mine?
Why don't you jump into yours? We'll talk about the Blazer some other time.
All right. So I had the 2019 Honda Pilot Elite, which is a lovely 3-row crossover, like we've been apparently the theme this week. I liked a lot of stuff about it, and there's some things I really kind of disliked, and I feel like they're kind of a miss. The 3-row obviously is one of the best features of the Pilot, but I feel like if you're going to go with the Pilot, you might as well just go with the Odyssey, because they're about the same. They kind of drive about the same.
But the Odyssey's a minivan.
Wait a minute.
It's not an SUV.
Dude.
So when you try to get to the 3rd row on the Pilot, you've got to press the stupid button on the seat to get it out of the way, and you still don't really have much room to get back there. With the Odyssey, you have like a hallway.
Yeah, but we all know the practical. We all know the practical appeal of a minivan, but it's a freaking minivan.
Yeah, but I think that's actually better. The cargo area is good. The Pilot's big, and even when you're using all 3 rows of seats, you still have an okay cargo area. It's not great. It's better in the Odyssey because it's longer and it's more square. So there's more room.
I can tell you that, if you're going to be a cool mom and dad, you're going to have, and you have to have a minivan, and you have to have a minivan. The Odyssey is the cool mom and dad minivan to have, but
yeah,
it's still a minivan.
but okay. I feel like the minivan now is like the sort of counterculture mom and dad thing too, like the Volkswagen Type 2 buses.
No, that's a wagon.
The 80s. Like,
that's a station wagon. That's the counterculture.
Okay, all right. So
a Jetta wagon.
Right, a Jetta wagon, not the all-track, because that's too much like an SUV, right? We wanted anyway with a manual. A lot of the stuff is really easy. It's easy to get in and out of, which is nice, especially if you're transporting, the young kids all the way up to, folks in their 80s, which is just something I did with the Pilot. The Elite has everything. So it's got the movie player thing and
the vacuum
all of that
cleaner
stuff. Yeah, it didn't have the vacuum. It had cabin talk, which was interesting, which we left it on, and we were talking smack about someone, and they heard us.
Oh no!
Because that
is a pretty cool feature.
You have that microphone in the front seat, and so you discuss things, and the kid from the 3rd row is like, "I can hear you," in my head. He's like, "Shoot." Forgot about that. But it is an interesting feature because it's so big. You don't have to bellow quite as loud. So it's like the family features are really well thought out. It's got cup holders galore. It's got, just everything is easy to use. Even the seats to get them out of the way. There's a button on the back. There's a button on the side. So it really feels like Honda, when they designed it, had people actually use it and say, well, okay, think about how you're going to work with this and how it's going to function. I like and don't like their shifter, their kind of deconstructed electronic shifter. It's not terrible, but it's still, there's a little bit of a learning curve. You have to remind yourself where all the switches are for it, because they broke out the switch. They did very much like GMC, but not quite as bad as GMC.
I was going to say, it's not as bad as the GMC Terrain.
Yeah. But there's, in my 10-year-old was asking, he was like, why do you pull the thing in for reverse? I was like, that's so you don't, it's a different motion. You can operate it by feel, which I do like, but it's still not anywhere near as easy as even a rotary controller would be. But with a rotary controller, the detents are all just clicks, or certainly not as familiar as a stick. So some of that's us learning. If they're going to change the convention, we're going to have to learn the new one. I really didn't like the infotainment. It's the touch targets are really small. The screen is really crowded. It all works okay. It's just not. It's distracting to use. And so I was driving down the road in this thing, and I'm, wandering all over the lane trying to just, zoom the nav or something. And I wasn't even that distracted, but it's just. That's not good. They need to have people use that more and maybe take some of the crap out of the screen. Or there's not really a great solution, right? Because we talk about Census with its multiple screens and it has larger touch targets, but that's also a problem because then you've got to swipe to get the other screens. So I don't know. All I know is that this system was a little bit cumbersome to be using and distracting, which that will go away as you own the vehicle. But the fact that the things you have to touch are small and closely spaced, that's never going away. And that I feel like that's borderline dangerous.
This is a common complaint both in Honda and Acura. The Acura RDX, that system is almost impossible to use. That's the one where they said we don't want to have the touch screen because we feel like it's too far away. It's distracting, and so they put this pad in, and it's awful. And I agree. I think that Honda really needs to concentrate on getting a better HMI because it's the way that you have to use that system. The learning curve is long on it. And as you say, those kinds of things, where they are, the size of the touch field, those are not changing. And I've had a lot of concerns when I have been in their product using the HMI. It's not easy. And this to me extends both to Honda and as well as Acura.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually kind of like the Acura
you're weird.
RDX
You're
touchpad
weird.
system. I am. What can I say? But I don't disagree on the other stuff you're saying. And I think again, I will say again that touchscreens do not belong in vehicles that we have to drive. Period.
Agree with
Exclamation point.
100%.
They should, there should be some sort of remote controller, and I'm okay with the RDX touchpad. I still prefer, the rotary control style, the iDrive style controllers. I still think that is the best solution that anybody's come up with yet. It's the most precise and accurate, and you can use it quickly.
Yes. And you learn, and maybe for me, it's because I've dealt with, like audio and video hardware. And so I'm very used to the jog dial and the multifunction kind of thing about that. So for me, I also find the rotary controllers easy to use, easy to figure out. They'll get there, I hope. And you put that together with the fact that the ADAS system also wasn't very good. It has all of the stuff. I guess I can't say it wasn't very good. It was aggressive, and you can adjust how aggressive it is. But I left it all in normal just to see how they think it should be. And so it's pretty sensitive when you start to drift or out of a lane, or if it detects cross traffic, it gets confused a bit more than I thought it would. Like with side streets and stuff. And it's conservatively programmed, I think, to just warn you to pay attention, which is not terrible, because it will flash the orange sort of brake indicator at you and sort of it gets your attention enough to look out. So that's fine. I would rather them err on that side of caution. But the dynamic cruise control and stuff was just it was tuned to either accelerate or brake and not coast. Like the Germans do just a fantastic job at that, and Volvo as well. So Mercedes, BMW, Volvo, Audi, they're all, and those are all luxury brands. I get it, but their dynamic cruise is very smooth. And the issue that I have with that when it's not smooth is like, don't even bother putting it in the car. Just give me regular cruise control, because I don't want the thing riding the freaking brakes on the highway or whatever, or just slowing down very aggressively. I would rather just have regular cruise and, keep an eye on the road and kick it out of cruise control when I'm closing too fast on stuff, and then re-engage it when I've got some clear room. It's not pleasant to be in a car that's driven that way. It's almost driven by somebody, like it's driven by somebody who doesn't have that finesse. And so I didn't like that at all.
So I didn't have that much of when I went on the Pilot media drive when they were trying to show how off-road capable it was, which was a lot of fun, but we didn't really use the adaptive cruise control. I will say that I'm pretty sure it was the Toyota Highlander. I made myself car sick.
I had
it last summer, and I decided to try it out in stop and go traffic because a friend of mine was like, oh my gosh, it's the greatest thing. I was like, all right, I've got New Jersey traffic to contend with. This will be a good example of it. Well, I got to my friend's house and I was white as a sheet and I felt like crap because I literally was car sick.
Yep. It's the same experience, and so I'll just shut it off most of the time. And the ones that can do it really surprise me, but overall, it's like, you know what? I'd rather not have this thing doing this stuff because it sucks. And you know, the Pilot, it does drive. It's not. I didn't find it as great on the highway as I did on like surface streets, you know, back roads, especially a twisty back road. It's actually decently fun to drive because it handles better than it really should. And it rides pretty well in that situation. But on the highway with a full load of people or almost full load of people, it didn't really feel as supple as I thought it should. You know, its ride was a little harsh. It felt a little ponderous, which surprised me. You know, and maybe that's just because it was, I don't know, it didn't have that solid sense of straight ahead that you'd get maybe if it were tuned a little differently. So it's not the car I would buy with my own money, but it has a lot of merit. Economy wise, 21, 22, which is not great. It's a big thing, but if you're going to deal with all of that, again, just get the Odyssey. It's easier to load. It's got more space. It has all the same stuff, and it drives about the same. So
I'm never going to give you the Odyssey, but I will tell you. But I know what you mean about the ponderous. I felt like when I had it, it drove pretty big.
Yeah.
You know, there's, and I've talked about this before, there's vehicles that drive smaller. They feel smaller when you're driving them. And there's vehicles that are just big. And I was always conscious of the size of the Pilot, but it just was big.
And it is big, to be fair.
It is
big,
but it drives like that too.
But you're right. Yes, you're right. It drives way more like an SUV than I expected it to.
Right. Yes. As opposed to like even like the crazy Ram 1500 that I had in Manhattan. You know, I looked back, I was like, oh yeah, I am in a pickup truck. Like, you know, that big vehicle, it didn't drive big, but I did find the Pilot drove ponderous, I think is a good word. I think I like that word for it.
Yeah. That's my take on the Pilot. I was a little disappointed. So let's move on to topics, because you know who's not going to be disappointed. I'm trying to make the transition work. Is Don Sherman. Because we're finally supposedly going to actually get his his white whale.
After 40 years of tilting at windmills, Don Sherman is finally getting what he wants from a Corvette, and that's to have the engine behind the driver.
You know, they made one of those. They called it a Fiero.
No, that never. Unfortunately, because of the Corvette, you know, they never made the Fiero into what it could have been.
I'd like to talk to Don about the Fiero. I bet he'd have some interesting, amusing things to say about it. But
oh yeah, he's always got amusing things to say about a lot of.
So I have to confess, I have a little bit of the soft spot for the Fiero because my late great father somehow worked on the interior of that through his work as a heat application expert in a variety of industries. And this fabulous guy came to our house. We had dinner with him when I think I must have been 12 or 13 years old, and I was completely enamored.
Well, you know, I also have a soft spot for the Fiero because it's just cool. It's it's a mid-engine car. With the automatic and the Iron Duke, you can have it, but with the V6, the Formula, and it had a really, really very, very pimptacular interior in its first few years.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, you know, the Fiero was only in production for about 3.5 years, and it was really only in its last model year that it actually got kind of good.
Yeah, it's GM. They fix everything and then they kill it.
Yeah, yeah, because the original concept behind the Fiero was they wanted to do more bespoke parts specifically designed for this thing, and in order to get it through the process of getting it approved, they had to cut the cost down, which meant using parts from other GM vehicles. So the front end, the control, the dual control arm front end suspension came from the Chevette, which, believe it or not, actually had a double wishbone.
Yeah, no, that doesn't
suspension.
surprise me. Yeah,
and at the rear they used the front end of the Chevy Citation.
Right, it was the X-body cradle.
Yeah,
but okay, but like other cars have done that very successfully, like the Bertone or the Fiat X19, which was basically I think it was like a 124 or 128 cradle that was stuck in the middle of the car.
Yeah, but the Fiero was a little bit bigger and heavier, and the bushings were softer, and it just wasn't well tuned. It didn't have enough brakes. It didn't have enough engine. The Iron Duke, really was. It should not have ever gone in that car. They should have just done the V6 version and left it at that. But that's the way it turned out. By the time they finally got everything fixed in the third model year, then it had such a bad reputation that they finally just killed the whole thing.
Well, and that was the Roger Smith era too. So they do stupid crap like that, where and we were talking about this before we started recording, where GM would they'd give you 2/3 of what they promised that first model year, hurry up to fix everything else that they actually wanted to deliver with the car, and so it's on the market getting a total shellacking because it doesn't measure up. And but just wait till next year. They're like the perpetual. What's a team that never wins the World Series anymore? He was going to use the Red Sox.
The Cubs.
The Cubbies.
Right,
well, the Red Sox, yeah.
Well, I thought the Cubs just won.
Both of them did.
Or the Mets.
I don't know. Anyway, they're a perpetual team that's just like, just wait till next year. They're perpetual Lions. How's that?
Oh.
There you go. That's it. Definitely the Lions.
And like they need to stop doing that. So I to get us back to the C8, I really, really hope Don is right this time, because he's had scoops about the mid-engine Corvette since like 1968.
Right, except this time, for the first time ever, GM is actually saying, yes, it's here, it's coming, and they actually released photos of it wrapped in camo. With Mary Barra, she was in New York with it this week. She was speaking at some event, and she and Taj Juicer, the chief engineer on the Corvette, drove up in this thing, and she got out of it, and they announced that they will be revealing the next generation Corvette, the C8, on July 18th, 2019.
Are they going to have
which henceforth will be known as either Don Quixote Day or Don Sherman Tilts at Windmills Day.
I like Don Quixote Day. I think we should coin that right now, and we should definitely make sure we get credit.
So let me ask you: is there some significance to July 18th that I don't know about?
Not that I'm aware of.
But yeah, I don't know either. They'll tell you if there is. They'll certainly make.
Well, it is. I mean, they did highlight the 8.
I mean, it may well be the day the original Corvette was.
Yeah, that's
1953.
So they did highlight the 8 for the C8 in the July 18th. Yeah. But 8/8/19 may have been better. But
it's a Thursday, so I don't know. I'm not aware of any particular significance to that day.
Okay.
And they haven't said where it'll be revealed or anything, but I mean, we've been seeing the spy photos of this thing for at least a good 3 years now, 3-4 years now, and it's been a long gestation for it. And apparently, it'll be offered with a number of different powertrain options. Starting with basic small block V8s, and it's supposed to be priced, from like the between $60,000 and $70,000 for the base model, which means it probably won't be anything like the Ford GT with its full carbon fiber tub. It'll probably be an aluminum tub and things like that, which is fine for a road car. And then the top end versions are expected to have a variant of the Blackwing V8 that is in the Cadillac CT6.
Oh, the V8 that they said absolutely not. It won't be in anything else.
Well, it won't be in anything else with 4.2 liters of displacement.
I see.
which means it'll probably have like 4.5 liters of displacement and more boost and, another 100 or 150 horsepower.
Yeah, that really confused me when GM, again, doing a classic GM move, like, nope, we're going to develop this one engine, $1 billion program for one division. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Are you stupid?
For a very low volume car.
Yeah. So clearly it's going to have to be in something else. Or they're going to go bankrupt again. Either or. Yeah.
No, it'll get used. It won't be exactly the same, but it'll be the same basic architecture.
Yeah, same enough. So what else do we know about it? Are they going to make any electrified versions, or has the platform been designed for it?
There's been rumors of a hybrid, but nothing confirmed yet. I think we've heard that it will be a 7-speed dual clutch transmission, a Tremec 7-speed DCT as the only transmission, which is that's basically the same transmission that's in the new Shelby GT500.
The gearbox of sadness.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm sure it's good.
Yeah, other than that, we don't really know any other details at this point. So probably starting somewhere in the 450 to 500 horsepower range and going up to, somewhere around 750, 800 horsepower at the top end.
It's going to be a lot of car for the 75-year-old guys that buy it.
Well, so are Ferraris and
that's true.
And Ford GTs.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll get some new customers.
Well, so here's the problem with the Corvette. I mean, I love it, and it's a performance bargain. It doesn't get the respect I feel that it sort of deserves, because it's always
and I think that's part of why they're going to a mid-engine design, because they, nobody takes a front-engine car like that seriously.
Why?
In 2019, for the same reason that people buy SUVs instead of minivans.
Oh my God!
They are not. People are not rational.
I drove.
They don't look at what it actually does. They look at what they think it might be able to do on paper.
Okay, so I think the last press Corvette I had was a long time ago now. It was a C6, but it was a 4LT, so it looked really good. It wasn't the Grand Sports or anything. It was so quick. And, it drove really, really well. And for the price, you run out of talent well before the car runs out of capability. And so it doesn't really matter where the engine is in that car. It's just well done. That is a fantastic sports car.
Well, and even though the engine is in front, it's back behind the front axle. So it's technically a front mid-engine car.
I got yelled at on Twitter for saying that.
And it's got a rear transaxle, so the weight is balanced. It's a 50-50 weight distribution. So anybody that tries to downplay the capabilities of the Corvette, at least of any modern C6 or C7 Corvette, it's as good as anything on the road, in its performance range. So. It may not be able to keep up with the McLarens of the world, but it'll certainly run with any 911 or V8 engine Ferrari.
And you can buy 2 Corvettes for the price of a McLaren, if not 3.
Yeah, you could buy 2 ZR1s for the price of a McLaren.
There's that.
And that's yeah. Speaking of which, I saw one yesterday at Cars and Coffee. And that is just a massive wing on that thing.
Yeah, McLarens are ridiculous. There's a dealership here in town that is just. I drive by it periodically just to get my fix.
All right, next up, what do we got? What?
I was gonna film. We got. If you ever wanted that $35,000 Model 3 from Tesla, you're never going to get it. Well, at least not new.
You might be able to get it, but Tesla's going to make you work.
This is when I wish I could sing, because I want to break out into that Beyonce never going to get it, never going to get
it. Just over a month ago, Elon Musk, held a conference call and announced that we're finally going to start selling the $35,000 Tesla Model 3, and we're going to close all our stores, and all our sales are going to be online only. And then within a week, It's like, okay, we'll keep the stores open, but we're still going to focus on online sales and use the stores for deliveries. And they promised on February 28th when they had when they made the original announcement that they said that you'd be able to get the $35,000 Model 3 standard range, as they called it, within about 2 weeks. And as of yet, it doesn't appear that they've actually delivered one to any customer anywhere in the world. And now this week they made it vastly more difficult to actually order a $35,000 Model 3. For some reason, even though they emphasize, buying your car online, you cannot actually order a $35,000 Model 3 online. To order one, you either have to get to a Tesla store and do it in person, or get on the phone and call Tesla and beg them to sell you one. At which time they will almost assuredly spend as much time as necessary to upsell you to one of the more expensive models.
I don't understand why.
Really don't want you to buy one.
Why should you beg them to sell a car to you? They should be begging you to buy their cars that are assembled poorly in a tent.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
And the strange thing is, when they announced the $35,000 car, in order to get down to that price point, they had to decontent it. So it had the smaller battery, but it also had manual cloth seats, instead of the power seats that are in all the other Model 3s, and they eliminated some other features. But now, for the one that they're selling, only over the phone or in person, you actually get what they call the Standard Range Plus model, which still has the power leather seats and other features. But features like autopilot are not available. You can't get autopilot on the $35,000 model. Various other features are actually disabled in software, even though the hardware is there. It's crazy.
I don't get how it's any cheaper for them to disable
money.
the software and leave the hardware in place. I mean, I get that it's expensive to take the hardware out.
That's why they made it so hard to buy, because they're actually going to lose more money on every one they sell than they would have with the original configuration.
Isn't that what startups do? I mean, I guess they're not really a startup, but they're just.
It's not a startup anymore.
Yeah. No, not a 15-year-old company is not a startup.
You can't.
Or 16 years old now.
It's valued as a startup. That's the difference. And the logic of
they
Wall
want
Street.
the cachet. Right. Everybody still thinks they're an upstart, which is okay, fine. So startup companies are supposed to just torch cash, so they're doing all right there.
Yeah, and the other thing that they've done is on all the other variants of the Model 3, autopilot is now standard. You cannot get any other Model 3 without autopilot. So it's they're forcing that option on customers. Whereas before it was somewhere around a 60 or 70% take rate. Now it's going to be 100%. So they actually raised the prices on all the others again. So they really don't want to. They just don't want to sell that car. They want to be able to claim that you can get a $35,000 Model 3 without actually selling any, which I believe is known as bait and switch.
I can understand wanting to dissuade buyers from buying the thing that they lose the most money on. It's kind of like the idea of compliance cars too. So while we can be real snarky about it, they're not the only automaker that makes a thing that they really don't want you to buy.
Right, and traditionally, every automaker has offered, lowball versions of their more popular models, and dealers, would they might stock one and keep it in the back of the lot somewhere, with manual seats and everything, just so they can advertise it. Yeah, we've got got this car for $18,000, and when you go look at it, you realize, I really wanted power windows and not manual crank windows, and a few other features. And so, well, come on over here. We've got a whole bunch of them over here. So they're essentially what they're doing is they have grown up into a real car company because they're behaving just like every other car company. And it's funny on Twitter, people were complaining about, why does Tesla keep changing the prices on their cars? And Elon Musk responded, that traditional car companies do this all the time. They constantly change the prices on their cars. And, they don't, the dealers will haggle on the price of the car. Car companies don't usually change the prices that frequently. And, what they're, but, the other thing is it also undercuts the argument that Tesla is a different kind of car company because they're behaving just like traditional car companies always have. So they're really not.
I responded to that tweet with something to that effect. Like, so let me understand that now the measurement for Tesla is a traditional car company, and he didn't.
Yeah.
When it's convenient.
He didn't respond.
Yes. I think car companies also do this too. Like they'll conveniently justify what they're doing either in sort of say like, well, yes, we're a car company and car companies do this, or yes, we do this that other car companies don't. And depending on which way the wind blows or what point they're trying to make, and they'll all do that. So Tesla is just in this position where they're very visible and they're way more blatant about it. So I maybe they should consider before they let Elon speak again.
Oh, that's not going to.
Yeah, well, they should just take away his Twitter account. But
I continue to be really frustrated by Tesla because there's so much potential there, and they're almost there. They just need a few people to come in there and shape up their manufacturing a bit. So they can get those lines running efficiently. They clearly don't have Poka-yoke or just in time down because the cars are going out with super crazy defects. They got stockpiles of parts. Like all of that stuff is solvable. I don't want to say it's easily solvable because it takes effort, but all of the other car companies have figured it out. And that's really I think that's a big part of what they need to move beyond this current position. And I don't know that they're ever going to get there. And that's a shame because the product is really good in a lot of ways. And it has potential to be better and to actually be a legit car company.
Yeah, I mean, he had such momentum in many ways. But I am, when you look online and see people's, as you move into people's feedback and as you move into mainstream, the tolerance level of people goes down. I mean, it degrades, and so people are going to be like, I don't want to put up with this. I just want to go to a dealer. And that's one of the things that, right. Vehicles like the Audi e-tron, the Jaguar I-Pace, more traditional manufacturers are going to have that dealer support and that service support that Tesla is going to continue to struggle against. So, I think Audi got a lot of flack for the e-tron. I know we talked about this a little bit last week, but I would trade 30 miles of range for a reliable dealer network all day long.
Yeah, I would as well. Yeah.
And not having to wait, months and months for service parts.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the thing. You can sell that thing, right? That premium thing probably once, maybe twice. But if the sales support and the ownership experience isn't there, you're not going to get that third time. I mean, you see it with. I hate the comparison with phones, but you see it with phones too. People move around because they want to try the cool new thing, but they'll move back and forth between Android and iPhone and Pixel or whatever. If that's what you want to be doing, there's less tolerance for having to put up with that crap, even on the people who are early adopters.
Right.
But definitely as you get down, for me, I want $100 phone that can make phone calls and can do a few things. I don't care about most other things with it, but if it's not going to be reliable, I'm going to switch.
Well, I will tell you, I mean, my friends at Strategic Vision, which is a new car buyer survey, they have repeatedly said over the last few years that Tesla owners are the most passionate, most enthusiastic. They love their car more than any other car owner. And interestingly, it used to be they were seeing that type of effusive praise from Chevy Volt with a V owners, and Tesla actually superseded them. So it'll be very interesting to see as we move into Model 3 owners if that same loyalty remains, and as you talked about, if they are repeat customers because people's tolerance is pretty low. You don't have to put up with it. That's the thing is there's so many choices, and Tesla is going to start facing significant competition. And so,
Yeah.
It's something that I'll definitely be tracking to see how Model 3 owners may differ from Model S and Model X owners.
Yeah, I mean, you can go buy a Honda Accord or Toyota Camry or a Civic, for $25,000 and have a car that's going to run reliably for 10, 15 years without a problem. You just rotate the tires and put gas in it and change the oil a couple times a year, and you're going to be good to go. And on the rare occasions when something does go wrong, you can be pretty confident that the dealer is going to be able to fix it, usually the same day. And that's what people rely on for their transportation. They need to know that they're going to, it's going to be there for them every day, that it's going to get them to work and school and wherever else. And they're not going to have to mess around with it, spending, 2/3 of its life in the dealership waiting for parts.
Yeah, well, and I think really where they're going to lose people, and they've already lost some cachet, is the Model X. Where that's a family car. That's the SUV / minivan thing, and so when you've got a family of small kids or whatever in the car, and the thing breaks or won't go, and you're stranded, like it's not just you, rich executive guy with vanity plates. It's you and your family, and it's much more of a hassle and stress to now figure out, okay, how do we get this thing towed? Where does it have to go? What are we driving in the meantime? How long is it going to take to fix? Like, there's a big impact, and I think that as you move down market, you're not going to have that. People just want the car to be a car. They don't want to be necessarily like, influencers. They just want the thing.
They don't
to
want
work,
the drama.
Yeah. So I can see why they don't want to sell you the $35,000 car. I think they should put their efforts. If I were Tesla, I would put all of my effort into actually making a $35,000 car, whether it's the Model 3 or like the very next things. Nope, we're going to completely shift gears here, and we're going to make that $35,000 or $25,000 car, and yeah, it'll be basic. It'll have it will be set up so that we can at least break even at whatever sort of price point, and it will be different. That's a big undertaking because I don't think any of their platforms are set up for that right now, where they can be flexibly transformed.
And if you don't want to wait for Tesla to do that, you can just go down to your local Chevrolet or Nissan or Hyundai or Kia dealer and get an EV that goes between 200 and 250 miles for that same price point.
All right. We should move on.
Yes. One more topic.
Yeah. So the last topic, this is more of a media critique than it is about a vehicle, but the New York Times, I guess it was last week, published a story, and it was actually a pretty interesting story about the Boeing 737 MAX, which there's been a couple of crashes, and they're trying to figure out why it's crashed. And one of the concerns is that they tweaked an older airframe to be more fuel efficient with more powerful engines, and that changed the dynamics of it. And because it's a lot more intensive and expensive to redesign the airframe, they used software to compensate. Like, none of this is really groundbreaking. This is done all the time. It may be the way it was implemented here is bad. Certainly the way Boeing has informed pilots who actually fly the thing, it looks like it could use some revisiting, and the regulatory capture where they kind of like Boeing said it was good, so the FAA said it was good is to me that's weird. But the New York Times, when we're covering these things, planes, cars, boats, whatever, trains, it's really, really important for us to have perspective and an understanding of the thing we're covering. So their lead on it was basically Boeing 737 MAX, 1960s design, 1990s computing power, and paper manuals. I don't know if that's supposed to be a criticism. None of them on their own are bad. Paper manuals don't crash. 1990s computing power, if it's up to the task, like, that doesn't bother me. That's reliable because it's hardware that's been around for so long. The 60s design, I mean, again, if it was designed well, who cares? I still use recording consoles that were designed in the 60s, and people actually seek that stuff out because in some ways it's more desirable than the stuff we have now. So I don't know. It seems irresponsible on the New York Times part, and I wanted to see what your guys' opinion of it was.
Well, I think that there's certainly some of the issues around the Max are in fact directly related to the fact that it is such an old design. If the 737's chief competitor is the Airbus A320 family, which was designed in the 1980s,
right, much newer.
And if you look at this article, the Times article, the lead photo they have on here is actually of the original 737 prototype. And one of the things you'll notice if you look at that compared to the Max or any recent 737 is the engines are entirely different. Back in the 1960s when they designed this thing, they didn't have big, high bypass turbofan engines, which are much larger in diameter. And, so they designed it around the engines of the time, which were, much skinnier. And, part of the problem is that, because they designed it that way, the 737 actually has fairly short landing gear, so it sits fairly low to the ground. When you see one on the ground and you see it next to an A320, the A320 sits up much higher. It's got longer landing gear, in order to clear the larger, more modern engines. And so every time that Boeing has had to update the 737 over the last 50 years, they keep having to basically hack it to figure out how are we going to fit these bigger engines without scraping them on the ground, without completely redesigning the landing gear, because there's nowhere for them to make longer landing gear so it sits up higher. And so part of that is what led to where we are today. The latest generation has gone to, again, even larger engines, because those larger engines are more efficient. They have larger fans on them, so they're much more fuel efficient.
They move more air. It's basically the core.
But the problem is you can't fit those big engines under the wing like they did on those early 737s. So they have to hang it, put it on these pylons that are reaching out from the engine or from the wings and up higher in order to clear everything. And so you have this kind of crazy hack job that they've done, which mostly works. But with the latest generation, as they went to even larger engines, that's what led them to go to this maneuver and control augmentation system, which is an automation system that is designed to compensate for the extra weight and lift that these new engines make, and try to make the new 737 fly basically the same as the old 737, so that they don't have to retrain pilots.
Right, because yes, and that so. Right there, I think that's really the core of the issue. Is Boeing was trying to skate by, and so when covering it, like, that's the story, not the fact that the plane is old or that engineers were pressed really hard to make changes in an economic way and make compromises. See, the engineering side of the story is fascinating because yes, like when you're talking about it, the first inclination is like, well, if they got bigger engines that hang lower, just make the landing gear taller. Well, you can't because there's nowhere for it to go. Well, why is there nowhere for it to go? Well,
because it's this old design.
Right. But the fact that like Boeing is putting this out and not retraining the pilots, not requiring simulator time or anything like that. Like that's to me the story. And I don't know. I find on the car side of things too, like we were just talking about Tesla, and we have a certain level of understanding because we follow it, and I feel like it's easy for us to get, I guess, written off as sort of like cynics because the general public has been fed a different story about Tesla from the media. Again, like it's the car company that's changing everything, right? So it's like a responsibility when we're covering, I guess, this whole sector. I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way, I suppose, the way it was posed.
Well, yeah, because the assumption is that everything that we do right now is somehow better, right? That's the thing, is that the assumption is that because if it's software related or technology related, it must be better than it was back in the 60s. And that's not always the case.
Yeah. Or
I'm sorry, I just go ahead.
No. We've got writers who don't know the sector that they're covering, and I do see that especially with electric vehicles.
Look at what the New York Times recently put out about how nobody's going to be driving a car, right?
Yes.
And they just did that
piece
op-ed.
Was fun.
A couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it was Kara Swisher's op-ed.
I don't. I'm not an aviation expert at all, but I do think that reading this kind of stuff, skirting by, some of the safety features that were optional for companies like Ethiopia Air and Lion Air, they should never have been optional. And,
right.
But I also think that we can relate some of this, we were talking earlier about some of the HMI and dealing with some of the infotainment systems and such, that if you do not take the time to familiarize yourself with the technology that's in your vehicle, it can be so distracting that you crash. And we've seen that. And I think that, with this, what's tragic about these pilots is that the emphasis was not on, you have got to be retrained on this and you can't fly this plane until you are properly trained on this. And that's sort of the emphasis that I don't get the impression was.
And in fact, it was the exact opposite. That you don't need any training. You can just hop from a 737-800 into a Max, and it'll be exactly the same.
That, to me, is the absolute tragedy, because both of these crashes could have been avoided. Hundreds of people, and then on top of that, all of the, revenue loss. Obviously, it's not as important, but, there's still economic and cost to this now beyond the tragic loss of life. So it's just terrible. Yeah,
it's interesting to compare and contrast this situation with Boeing and the 737 MAX with something like the Columbia disaster, where it's not any one thing. And it's the same with with the Challenger as well. It's not any particular one thing. It's a cascade of things. So Challenger was more, I guess, one thing. But
and the same is true of most car crashes. You always hear the statistic that 94% of car crashes are caused by human error. Well, that's true only up to a point. It's the human error may have been the last part of that, the last step in that cascade. There's usually a whole bunch of circumstances that led up to the human making an error, that ultimately led to a crash. They did not respond to these other circumstances in the best way possible, and that's what ultimately led to the crash. So you're right. These things are always way more complicated, or almost always way more complicated than just a single point of failure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And in terms of car crashes too, I saw a story the other day where it was again reiterating that smaller cars have less or have more injuries in crashes. The same kind of thing. They crash more, and you tend to get injured more. So if you want to be safe, get an SUV. It's like, well, hang on a second. Why did the statistics tell you that? And I didn't look deeply into it, but in the past, when I've dug into those kind of numbers, it's the combination of who's driving, what their training is, what their age is, what the situation is, what the speeds are, all together. You can make broad comparisons and say, yes, SUVs tend to be, you'll be injured less because they go slower. They're driven by older folks who are being more conservative. A small, light hatchback, for example, is going to be generally, that's a younger, less experienced driver who doesn't have as much crash structure around them. They get hit by an SUV, So.
Well, and the other flip side of that is, while occupants in SUVs may die less, you know who dies more?
Drivers and
pedestrians.
Yeah. Oh, pedestrians.
No, pedestrians. Sure, yeah. And pedestrians have actually been the single largest segment of growth in traffic fatalities over the last 5 years.
Yeah. Well, I can believe it, especially with everybody being in their phone.
Even that's Yeah, well, I mean, even that one, is not as simple as just because we have more SUVs. People, you have the problem of
Yes, I was just
distracted
going to
walking.
say that.
People walking and texting.
Well, I mean, you get distracted
not
walking
paying
and
attention.
driving. Like,
Yeah.
I hit a bump. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, no, it is, but it's crazy when you see people that are crossing the street and they are just totally not paying attention at all.
Yeah.
You know, it's incredible. And so you have, it's always a mix of factors.
Yeah. And so I just hope that, at least for whatever part we do, we're trying to bring some understanding of the subjects we're talking about. Because I feel like there really is a very, very interesting story of compound failures in the case of the 737 MAX in particular. There's a lot of material right there. So we have to be careful when we're saying, well, it's old, so it's not very good. Or it has paper manuals, so it's not very good. It's like, I'm sorry. We sent 3 guys to the moon and back with paper manuals.
much more
1960s
much more
tech.
primitive technology than what we're using today.
So, and again, that's a really, really common thing to say. I get it, but old doesn't necessarily mean bad. Paper doesn't necessarily mean bad. Like none of those are the problem. And you kind of miss the boat by using those as your headline or your lead. And that's, I guess, my criticism of the New York Times this week. For now. So I maybe it's like a call out to listeners too, rather than just listening to us bitch, because I don't want to turn into a media criticism podcast.
There's already some very good ones to do that.
Call us out on stuff too, or because it makes the conversation that much more interesting if we spout off about something that we have missed half the story, and we're not doing that to obfuscate. So if there's a chance for us to get more educated too, like certainly please reach out. You know where to find us. So let us know.
Yes.
And I'll give it a rest.
All right.
Did we have any questions or anything? I know we're a little bit we're headed to New York.
Not that I saw.
So and you guys are headed to New York Monday, Tuesday, or anyway.
Yeah, I'll be there tomorrow morning.
Yeah, we've got a couple of embargoed showings that are going on, I think Monday and Tuesday. And then Wednesday is the show for the media and press. Thursday, there's some press events as well. And then Friday, is it open to the public? I think on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah,
I think Saturday it opens.
So
to the public.
be sure to go if you're in the New York area. It's such a great show. I know the Javits Center can be a huge pain to get to sometimes, but there's plenty of parking in that area. It's walking distance from Times Square, and it's just a great show. I always really enjoy Javits. It's nice and contained. There's fun things. Jeep always has something outside. The weather's not supposed to be that great, but
it'll be okay.
Well, now that they finally fixed the roof, and it's not leaking.
But I really like this show
rains.
a lot. I think it's really cool.
So New York was the first show I went to way back in 1995. I went and saw the Ford GT90 there with the hologram face and the
yeah.
And we took Amtrak down. We came into Penn. It's the same kind of thing. It's a short walk from Penn, I think.
It's very short from Penn.
It is. It's a good show. And then you're right around the corner from the Intrepid,
Yes.
which has a freaking space shuttle on it, or the SR-71. It's the only Essex class carrier, I think, on the East Coast you can go tour. And you're right by B&H. So it's a cool, I like that show a lot. I'm actually quite disappointed I won't be there.
You just have to be, I'm not sure when Passover
is
this
yeah.
year. B&H is closed for Passover.
That's correct. So yeah, you can at least walk by the building.
Yeah.
So all right, well, next time we'll talk about coverage from the New York show. Are you guys excited for anything in particular, or can we not talk about that yet?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the Lincoln Corsair.
Oh yeah.
I think that's going to be a very interesting product in the compact premium crossover segment. The Pininfarina is going to be there with the Battista electric hypercar that they showed in Geneva. Going to a lunch and round table with them on Tuesday. Let's see, both Nissan and Audi are going to be showing off some 50th anniversary special edition models celebrating the 50th anniversary of Nissan Performance in the U.S. with, the 50th anniversary of the Z, and then Audi's 50th anniversary in the U.S. market.
Genesis is showing something that I'm not sure about yet.
I would assume that's probably going to be their first crossover.
Yes, I would hope so.
Probably a production version.
Oh
of that.
wow, that's I didn't even realize that, but that's right. They don't have a crossover, and they sorely need
They
one.
do.
Hyundai's going to have their new.
They showed they showed the crossover, not the production version. Right,
they had
last
a concept
year in LA, 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Well, they had the GX90 in New York 2 years ago.
So that'll be fun.
And so, yeah. And then the Hyundai Venue as well is another subcompact crossover that actually slots in below the Kona.
Their whole lineup's going to be crossovers soon.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's going around.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it should be a good show. We should have plenty to talk about next time we convene. All right. Well, in the meantime, you can find us. We are at wheelbearings.media. We are on Twitter at wheelbearingscast. The only only vowel is the A in cast. I am Boston_auto. And you folks are, tell us your handles.
So mine actually changed this week to Rebecca_drives. And that's my Twitter account now. Rebel Car Chick is kind of hidden in the background now. I know it's not as fun, but I did need to promote my website.
And you can find me at Sam Abu.
And if you can spell it, you can get rewarded for finding it.
Just type Sam Navigant and you'll find him.
Yeah. If you get anything close to my name, it'll usually find me.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. We'll catch everybody next time.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Bye.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.